Can you actually see me? Because yeah, I actually think we're live. So now we just have to wait for participants, if we actually get any, on this beautiful Saturday where the hoarfrost is still clinging to the trees at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and winter is about to set in, which doesn't hurt my feelings. I've always been a fan of winter. But I'm not 100% certain that this is even working properly. Ah, I see Louise Goanlock. How you doing? Peace to you too. What's exciting on this fine Saturday morning as we all await the impending U.S. elections with all the gravity that they hold for the world? The entire world is holding its breath, I would say, at this moment. And it looks like we have 3 watchers now. I don't know why this is so slow to build in, and it was super slow to go live, too. I'm not really sure why that is. I also don't know entirely how to display the chat feed, as it would be nice to just have that without having to have the video open in another window. I'm not overly experienced with lives, so let's see. Maybe there's a source we can add. Let's see here. See if there's a source. Live chat viewer. Widget is not yet authorized to connect. This is exciting. You get to watch me work out my tech issues while you're at it. Good day, Michael Hleck. Hleck? Did I get that right? Michael Hleck? Hleck? Is that correct? Or can I do better? Or did I just completely massacre your last name and family lineage? Let's see, what can we do here? Authorized for use. Beauty. Michael Lex. So now we've got this. Now I need to put that behind my head. Man, that's boring. Nice flat gray. Rock the Casbah. How you doing, man? On this lovely frosty Saturday, at least where I am. I don't know what it's like anywhere else. Suits me just fine. Makes me feel nice and cozy. I don't mind winter one bit. I'm living in the right place for that. As we await the U.S. elections. So basically, I thought I'd hop on here because I rarely, I haven't really taken the opportunity to just chat with chat. That's really all I'm here to do. I think we're all just holding our breath. I mean, Tuesday's just around the corner. It's Saturday. They're trying to say that Donald Trump was performing fellatio on a microphone when if you just, this tried and tested pattern that they engage in of just using short little snippets and destroying context. What he was talking about was his microphone and how they didn't work and how the podium is low because he's a tall guy, something I can relate to. And these sick, twisted people, they've got to make it about fellatio. I mean, what does that say about them, that that's what they've got to make about it? Are the polls a lie? Are we talking about the U.S. polls? Because some polls are definitely suppression polls, arguably most of them. But if you look at reliable polls, now this is how I tend to score things. I go by record. I go by how right people have been in the past. So when I look for accurate polling information, I look at Rasmussen. I look at New York Times Siena. I look at Harris, does some good work, and there are other polling houses out there. But Rasmussen and Atlas Intel have had Donald Trump ahead this entire time. Those are the polling houses I trust because their margin of error in the past, in 2016 and 2020, was so narrow. I mean, they predicted the outcome. Now, you can talk about inflated numbers, and you can talk about fraud, and I think that's a conversation that should be had. I think that's a conversation that should be welcome in any democratic society or even a Republican society. You should be able to talk about election integrity without people shaming you. And I think the 2020 election was, we've actually seen it proven in court that there was fraud, and most of the cases never got litigated. The courts just denied standing or said they didn't have standing, or they weren't willing to touch it because it was such a big political thing. I think Trump's ahead. In the reliable polls, he's ahead. Now, whether that translates into a win on Tuesday, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to translate into a win. Great to see you too, Patrick. I can't help but every time I see your name, I get flashbacks to Patrick Brown in Ontario, and I apologize that man also shares your name because it brings shame to your family. Yeah, of course, I'm just kidding around. Low volume. So what, are you guys having a hard time hearing me here? Is that what you're saying? Can you hear me okay? Hopefully you can hear me okay. Maybe I'll just speak up a little bit louder. I think I'll change it to Maxime Bernier. Triggered. I'm actually not that triggered. I mean, you got to give the guy credit. He's managed to keep the story going for this long now. It's a tad low. Okay, hold on a second here. Maybe I can just quickly adjust something up. How about that? Is that going to be better for everybody? Let me know before we get going. Gainsborough, Saskatchewan. Biker Bob. I actually, for whatever reason, I noticed when you subscribed to the channel that you were a Saskatchewan boy. Good to see you in here. Can you hear me a little better now? Much better. Okay, good. That's awesome. So, yeah, back to Bernier. I mean, you got to give him credit. He's kept the thing going for 6 years. They raised $200,000 in the last quarter, which is probably just enough to keep the lights on and keep the wages paid. They still haven't introduced a constitution. There's still no people in the People's Party whatsoever. There's just serfs and volunteers and Max and his board of directors. They always talk about this leadership vote that they had like it was some kind of election. I got to tell you, I give them credit because the people that they sucker in were happy to get a little piece of paper where they could mark yes or no if they favored him staying on in leadership. There was no candidates. It wasn't an actual recorded election. It was just kabuki theater. And they bought it because they're still repeating it years later as though it gives some legitimacy to the party. They've never had a founding convention. They do have an annual general meeting, which they call a conference, which is required by law for a corporate entity. But these people don't even know what they're involved in. They don't even understand the corporate structure. They haven't looked at the corporate filings. And they don't want to listen, for some reason, to the guy who helped found the party, who ran in the 2019 election, and was among the first to publicly call them out for lying and breaking all their promises to their people. All the best people are gone. Anyway, I don't really want to make this all about Bernier. My home province is Saskatchewan. In BC, it's not good. Okay, so we've obviously got this. Something wrong here. There we go. Yeah, BC is not good. I can't say I don't understand the outcome of the election. I don't even think you don't need fraud to understand what happened in BC. I find it very interesting that the urbanized areas that are heavily immigrant voted overwhelmingly conservative, whereas the areas that you would say are third, fourth, fifth generation, mostly white British Columbians, voted for more of the homeless epidemic, voted for more of the drug epidemic. They love it. I don't know why they love it, but they just love it, and I guess they got to go through another 4 years of dealing with it before they figure out that they have to choose a different path. And, just to kind of put a bow on that, nobody was in a better position to understand if the election was fair or not than the Conservative Party of BC, and they've signed off on it. And once they sign off on it, it's over. So I think there's a conversation to be had around election integrity, and that your election officials and your elections commissions, they need to be more concerned with public trust than they do with extending the franchise to every last person, because I would say their first job is to ensure the public can visibly trust an election, and their second job is to make ease of access to people's franchise. And optically, when you have ballots coming in after Election Day that are being counted 7 to 10 days after the election, they're allowed to come in, that is wrong. That is so wrong. And we've seen some of that wrongness right here in Saskatchewan. Mind you, the ballots were in by Election Day, as far as I understand. But you shouldn't have polls being released, particularly 5 different polls that all had the NDP ahead that were 12-point misses. They were suppression polls. Forum had a 2,700 person sample size, which is just ridiculously huge for this province. And it was an attempt to give it legitimacy. And I would say an attempt to suppress that Saskatchewan Party vote. There should be no ballots accepted when the polls close on Election Day. There should be no polls released. If you want to have a week-long election, go ahead, have a week-long election. But there should be no polling done during that week. As soon as the polls open, that's it. No more polls. And ballots have to be in before the polls close on Election Day. And then you can do whatever you want. So I think BC has a lot more work to do ensuring public trust than even here in Saskatchewan that we have to do. I got to scroll back up. You guys are just filling the comment thread. That's awesome. Trump is likely to win. I agree. If the election is fair, I think it's a pretty likely Trump win. Going into the election at this point, having every reliable poll showing him ahead in the popular vote, he's never had that before. He's never been ahead in the popular vote. Clinton beat him by, I think, 2.5 points. Biden beat him by 4 or 5. Going into the elections, they had Clinton way further ahead. They had Biden ahead by 10, 12 points. It was ridiculous. And so now the reliable polls are showing Trump polling 1, 2, 3 points ahead nationally. That's a sweep. That's a 312 electoral college vote victory. I do obviously have concerns when you see ballot boxes on fire, and when you see all these ballots being found in Pennsylvania already, fake registrations. I don't like at all people voting on computers. I mean, I don't even like tabulators. Tabulators can be programmed to deliberately skip 1 or 2 votes here and there. Like, we've proven that. This isn't like some conspiracy theory. You can program a tabulator to deliberately miscount. And even on an accidental case-by-case basis, tabulators introduce a 10x greater error to counts than human error, and it can go either way. But this argument that they're more efficient or that they're necessary is totally flawed. Taiwan still does paper balloting and hand counting, and that's the only way to do it. I was so glad to see that Saskatchewan still does it by paper and by hand. There's no tabulators here. And to this point, I don't know what it's going to look like when we have the next federal election, but there hasn't been tabulators deployed in federal elections either. So we can manage to do a federal election in Canada using paper balloting and no tabulators, but we're supposed to believe that British Columbia can't manage an election with paper ballots and hand counting. It's ridiculous. Tried, tested, true method. You get the results the night of. It's the way to go. You got to have faith in it. And the United States, back to the point, what a gong show. Like, what a horror show to see people voting in machines and to see them dropping ballots in streets in these boxes. I mean, it's just, it's funny how they have way more choice than Canada. Like, they have so much choice. Canadians could only dream of having the kind of choice they have. They vote for governors, they vote for state senate, they vote for federal senate, they got the House, they got the president, they vote for their sheriffs, they vote for their trustees. They have so much franchise, and yet it's being completely digitized and watered down to the point where you are right to question it. You are right not to trust it, and you shouldn't trust your elections at face value. Anybody that says questioning the integrity of an election is somehow undemocratic is inverting reality. You're using your franchise, you're exercising democracy, you're exercising your rights when you question these processes, and that's the only way you keep them honest. So don't let anybody shame you out of asking questions. Let's just see here. Man, I got to scroll up here. Trump is likely to win. Brazen fraud is part of the Democrats' calculation. It does seem that the left loves to cheat. There's no doubt about that. They cheat in the media every single day by misrepresenting every single thing the guy does. I don't know why they hate him so much, but man, they do. It's clear that they do. Only factor is fraud. Agreed. Too big to rig seems to be the Republican strategy. Has to be. You have to have mass turnout. The right is consumed with the idea of playing fair and not cheating. So the only thing that you can do in that situation is you play the game to its fullest effect, whereas the left does not seem to worry about cheating. They don't have a problem with it. They don't have a problem lying. And not just deception by cleverly portraying the truth, but like outright lying. They're trying to say he was performing fellatio on a microphone, when what he was talking about was the microphone being low. As a tall guy, I can relate to that. I understood by watching 2 minutes, 1 minute to either side of the clip they're running with online. You know that he's talking about microphones not working and the podium being too low. And they're trying to paint it like he was performing fellatio on a microphone. How sick are these people that they got to go right to that? And even though you got J-Lo, the ex-girlfriend of Diddy, up on stage with her amazing ability to choose good boyfriends, telling you that you got to vote Harris. I mean, do these people even care about the optics of their story anymore, let alone the facts? It blows my mind. Let's just see. Don't underestimate the machine. It counts the votes. Welcome to the machine. True enough. I early voted in Saskatchewan. There were no scrutineers, just 2 poll workers. It was a rural riding. I had the same experience. I voted day of. I always vote day of. And I went in there with my kids, and it was the first vote they were ever involved in, so they got all the stickers. They had a lot of fun with that. But yeah, it was just 2 poll workers. But the boxes were sealed, and you can't assume that every single poll worker, or even the majority of poll workers, are trying to manipulate elections. I have every reason to believe that the vast majority of people who decide to work elections are honest players, especially in this beautiful province. I mean, the culture here, it brings a tear to my eyes sometimes, how beautiful people are here. I trust the election. I trust the outcome here, not just because, Mo won, and of course that's who I wanted to win. I trust the integrity more. I still have issues with mail-in voting. But if you're going to have mail-in voting, having 2 pieces of ID, proof of residence, you're still going to have absentee ballots no matter what you do. It's my firm conviction that you can still have it, but those votes have to be in by poll closing on Election Day, and nothing that comes in after Election Day should be counted. There has to be no opportunity after the vast majority of numbers are counted in a close election. There has to be no opportunity for extra ballots to be found anywhere. And that was my biggest problem with BC. The optics of that are absolutely terrible. Thank goodness calculators come out just in time for me to not have to learn how to use Daddy's slide rule. The military have to step forward publicly now. I don't know if we're at that point yet. I was not okay watching my ballot go into a computer feed. Absolutely not. You shouldn't be okay. Never be comfortable with that. That is a robbery of your franchise. Whether you're putting it in that tabulator yourself, or as some people reported, they had to hand it to a poll worker, and the poll worker put their ballot. That's a disenfranchisement. That's a separation of you from your vote. 1 paper ballot per person. You mark your X on it, and you put it in the box, and that box doesn't get opened until it's counted. Like, I'm a big fan of same-day elections. You know, people say you got to provide accessibility for people to vote. You have your franchise. It's up to you to figure out how to exercise it. I'm perfectly okay if I had to drive an hour and a half on Election Day once every 4 years to cast my ballot. I'd fill up my van with other people, and we'd all go together, and we'd all go vote, and I wouldn't care who you're voting for. Like, somebody said that if you're not willing to put effort into voting, then that is a valid filter. And I liked the way that he said that. If you're not willing to put the effort in to make sure that you can vote, and you don't want to do that, then fine. You don't have your franchise. You just gave it up. Like, it's not something that should be handed to you, even though it already is. You have a guarantee to your vote. But if you have to put some effort in, it's not an election official's job to make it easy for you. It is. It's a valid filter. One question derails the whole political cheerleader show along with the debate. Give us one nation in history of Jesuits that solved. I can't go there. I can't go there. Mama said, and it's not because I'm a Jesuit or anything else. I mean, I completely reject the notion that any one identifiable group is responsible for world history. It just seems so lazy to me, whether it's the Jesuits or the Jews or the Muslims or everybody's got their pet thing. Right on up to flat earthers who think the whole world is shaped around holding on to this narrative that the world's not round. I can't do it. It's intellectually lazy. We can talk about specifics, but the idea that there's one cabal that rules everything, it doesn't work. It actually does not work. Mama said, don't you buy no impossible? I don't know what that means. Lucky there was no Walmart when Kamala was in high school. Would have told her she'd make a fine Walmart greeter. I don't know. She probably would, actually. Let's give some credit where credit's due. She's a cheerful individual at the very least. If you met her at a party, she might be fun to have a laugh with. She's very good at laughing. And she, outside of political context, she's probably a bright personality. I mean, even Trump says her laugh is beautiful. It certainly stands out. It's quickly identifiable. Feeling we're in the calm before the storm period. Tony, yep, that's one possibility to explain where we're at right now. But then again, I'm also optimistic. I really hope Trump wins. I mean, what fun is that going to be? It's going to be so much fun the next 4 years. Watching Elon Musk and now Ron Paul. I don't know if you guys heard that yet, but Ron Paul is now going to be involved in the Department of Government Efficiency. So we're going to have this meme, Doge, that's going to be responsible for hacking and slashing the U.S. bureaucratic state and reducing its size, and Ron Paul and Elon Musk are going to be sitting in there. How fun is that? Also, if Trump loses, they will destroy SpaceX. And some people say, why are we wasting all this money going to space? We could be solving world hunger. And setting aside for a minute the distribution problem when it comes to world hunger, we can absolutely do it. That's a whole other conversation. Becoming multiplanetary is really cool. It's one of the Starship. When I first started to understand what was going on with Starship, I thought that's the coolest thing I've seen in my lifetime. It can not only put us on the moon, it can put us on Mars. It can start. We could reach. I won't be around for it, but reaching the asteroid belt, reaching beyond, gathering minerals, resources, the whole solar system's worth of possibilities open up a Starship. Big space station, big time space research, becoming multiplanetary. These are just cool things. As a species, we have to constantly be in an expansive state or we stagnate and we rot. And you can study the history of civilizations through time, and you can see this theme repeating over and over again, where people get rich, societies get stable, they get wealthy, they start experiencing demographic decline, and before you know it, they collapse and the barbarians destroy everything, and you have a period of darkness. In order for Western civilization to come out of this age of conflict, which we're in right now, we've been in an age of conflict for 20 years, probably since the World Trade Center came down, but it's really been accelerating in the last 9 to 10 years. And we're at a point of acute crisis. It's amazing to me that markets are not more responsive to the fact that there is a 2,000-mile long front line in a growing global conflict from Ukraine to Israel to the Red Sea and Yemen. You've got Israel and Iran lobbing volleys of missiles back and forth at each other, and we're on the cusp of something really bad. We have to navigate our way out of this, and then we have to reorganize into a new age of expansion. And how does that age of expansion work unless we're doing great things? And I think SpaceX is, I would love to see, if I got one thing out of the Trump administration, aside from having a very strong U.S. president when it comes to this gender ideology nonsense, because what's happening in Alberta is beautiful. I still don't think it goes far enough, but it's beautiful. we building momentum on that. I think the second best thing is, well, obviously having a chance at least to get out of all these wars. But a third thing is SpaceX, unfettered space development. I'm all for that every day. What fun we would have. And talking about making America healthy again, whatever RFK's shortcomings, shaking up the FDA, shaking up the American food system, being able to tell truth about additives that are in food, that's amazing. That's a wild card that I want to see it. Like, what fun. If you get Harris, all you get is more neocon, neoliberal garbage. You get more war. I don't know where the future is in a Harris administration. I really don't know. Everybody, including myself, from my humble self all the way up to Putin and Z, we're all just waiting on the outcome of this election. There's really not much left to say. All the cards are on the table. We're just killing the next 72 to 96 hours, waiting for this thing to happen and then seeing what happens after that. The whole world is holding its breath. So I'm all for Trump. I think you have to be. Like, there's nothing. We're going full Knights of Malta here. It's time for humanity to innovate in the ways we thought in the 2020s. I wish there was a way to stop this from just scrolling. How can I do that? Whatever, it doesn't matter. The Third World War narrative is just that, more distractions. I don't think so. I think I think there's a lot of people who shrug their shoulders at what's happening in the world who don't understand global history. There were a lot of people who thought, for instance, in 1914, that a global conflict was completely impossible. And within weeks, they found themselves embroiled in a world war that lasted 4 years and slaughtered a generation. And you could argue that you could see World War II coming, but I would argue that you could see World War II coming from the very fruits of Versailles and the Versailles Treaty. It was obvious that it was coming, but nobody did anything to stop it. And we're in a precarious situation where we're one wild card away from a chain of events and a reaction that spirals out of control. Everything is hyper-coordinated right now. I wouldn't argue that it's not. When you see the way that Israel and Iran go back and forth against each other, and every time there's talk of deploying long-range missiles in Ukraine on Zelensky's side, there's a lot of negotiations and there's a lot of public maneuvering about that. Like, this is very coordinated. When that coordination breaks down, it becomes unpredictable. And when it becomes unpredictable in a nuclear world, nobody knows what's going to happen. So let's hope it remains convoluted until at least we get some political clarity in North America. What's happening here? I hope Trump wins, but damn, the entire machine is against him. How will they allow it? I have no faith in the American voting system. We'll find out. I mean, people have overcome power many times throughout history, and too big to rig isn't just a motto. It's actually a strategic initiative. 750,000 people died in the Civil War, 30.5 million people in America then. Family killed family, not a good option. No, it's not a good option. War is never the best option. It's just necessary at times. There's no good reason why a national central bank should be in the red. It was Roman doing. That's when the central bank is losing money. Even what do we call it? Not the Federal Reserve. The Bank of Canada. Even the Bank of Canada was in red. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. It was sometime in the last 3 years, sometime in the COVID era. They actually lost money. It's like, how do the people who print money lose money? How can they possibly post a set of balance sheets where they've lost money when they literally control the printers? Get your paper dictionary and look up the word Jesuitism. Man, you got to go easy, man. It ain't all down to that one thing. Like, Frank, were you aware that Scott Mao is establishing a firearms compensation committee to determine the fair market value of any firearms ammo? And absolutely, I am. It's called the Saskatchewan Firearms Act, and it's brilliant because what people fail to realize is without a government in Ottawa that will repeal C-21, C-21 is the law of the land. But the provinces get to dictate how to implement that law. The Saskatchewan Firearms Act is genius because it sets up a bunch of bureaucratic and regulatory loopholes that the federal government has to try and pretzel themselves through. It's impossible. They've set up a regime that the federal government cannot hope to comply with. So enforcement here is dead in the water because of the Saskatchewan Firearms Act. Yes, it sets out how to establish fair value for compensation. That fair value could end up being many times the number of what your firearms are worth. C-21 is never going to happen. The buyback and the ban and all that stuff is never going to happen because the conservatives are going to come in and they're going to, at the very least, they're going to repeal that. I would put my personal guarantee on it. They're not going to back off on that. So C-21, even though it's law, it's dead already. But in the meantime, the Moe government moved to create a set of circumstances that were impossible for the federal government to comply with. So when you call him Mao, you probably think you're being clever, but you're missing the subtlety. It's just like the rebellion on the carbon tax or the Saskatchewan Revenue Act. These are all really cool things if you think about them. God is the most powerful force, so you believe in a Big Bang, fake it was spoken into existence, so all came from nothing. Nope, it came from the breath and voice of God. I don't think any human mind is capable of comprehending the nature of the universe or existence itself. In a human mind, we are restricted by thinking that there are beginnings and endings to all things. And we see that all around us in our material existence, in our human existence. But in order for us to even be sitting here having this conversation right now, something always was, something always will be, and there is no beginning and end to not even time. Time itself doesn't exist. That is a human construct. And if you sit there in contemplation thinking about it long enough, you're going to find out that most of your frames of reference when it comes to understanding your own humanness involve beginnings and endings and constructs that do not apply to the universe, which is so vast and big and massive in scale that you can't even comprehend properly in your own mind how big planet Earth is. I think that's why a lot of people get confused right out the gate. It is so vast and voluminous that I don't even think it's worth figuring out. You're here to have a human experience. That human experience, for most of us, I would say most of us, involves some spiritual dimension. Some sense that at different times in our lives, there's been something far greater and less understood than ourselves moving through our lives. And there seems to be a measurable morality to your interactions with whatever you want to call that. So there is good and there's evil, and it is measurable. There's right and there's wrong. And there seems to be an ephemeral spiritual dimension to it. But seeking after enlightenment, and I used to, when I was a younger man, I really wanted to understand these things. And as I've gotten older, I realized there is just no point. I don't want to be enlightened. I don't want to move my understanding beyond my human frame. Otherwise, it takes the magic away from being a human being. Part of being human is the limitations that are placed on you. Look at it this way. If you had, and you knew that you had an immortal soul, you knew it. You knew that when you died, you knew exactly where you were going to go. You knew exactly how it worked, and you knew you were either going to end up back here or you were going to move on and do something else, and you knew the procedure. Nothing that you do down here would have any value, wouldn't have any lasting impact. So let's just take one for instance. I got a picture above my desk of my dad and me as a little kid, and I look at it all the time. And I love my dad. He was such a good friend, and he was a big part of my life. And so if I knew that when I died, I was going to meet my dad again, 100% for certain, the sting of his death, which put the final exclamation mark on our relationship, would not have any lasting value. But I can tell you that if I drop dead today and I go back, I'm going to remember the feeling of losing him. And that's going to leave an impression on my soul that I couldn't get if I knew my soul was going to be reincarnated or otherwise just move on. If I knew I was immortal, the things that I learned, the lessons, the values, the pets you have and you love and you die, and the tragedies and the happinesses and like all the variations of the human experience, if you die and find out you're immortal, all of those lessons stay with you because you didn't know while you were here. So what's the point of seeking after enlightenment? What's the point of trying to figure out what is beyond the human experience when you're being a human? Just be a human and try to be a good one and try and keep an ear to the wind. Let's see what else we got here. Our government loses money selling weed. I know, biker. Isn't that funny? And we haven't just been losing money on weed in the post-prohibition era. We were losing money on weed when it was still illegal. Like, they botched that so bad. I mean, it's, on the one hand, I do think it's a positive. It's a net positive that we're not destroying people's lives over cannabis. It doesn't make any sense to me. But on the flip side, in some ways, I'm not sure the post-prohibition era is better. The way the government does weed it's disgusting. But if you go on to a reserve, like where I used to live, up the road was this place called Roseneath and Alderville. Hang on. And you'd walk into these weed shops. And I went in just to see it. I mean, there was like 9 weed stores in this little hamlet. And you walk in, and it's all glass cases. And it's all glass jars. And you can see every different type. And they've got blue light bottom lit. And they're like firing up on all the crystals. And they've got all the different products. And they got all the different papers. And it's all out there on display. And it's all at a price people can afford. And meanwhile, the government won't show you the product before you see it. It's got 15 layers of stamps on it, and I'm exaggerating. You can't see the product. It's priced through the roof. We botched weed. Like we literally took a guaranteed moneymaker and we figured out how to lose money with it. So bravo. I mean, in terms of losing money, no one's better than the government. Major wrench in the agenda. Lots of 1%ers around. Have you seen what optic cost? What optic cost? Like optics for guns? Yeah, they're not. There's nothing about firearms that's cheap. Like they did with the carbon tax. I've lost track of chat already. My AR-15 is worth $4K in Sask and only $800 in Ontario. Europa, the last battle. Watch it while you still can. That's interesting. That's an interesting point. Censorship in the post-Musk acquisition of Twitter era, now X. I've noticed that YouTube has backed off censorship. And I can't speak to Facebook because since my account was stolen over there, I don't even care what happens. I go on, I check out Marketplace. That's pretty much all I do with it anymore. And I have no interest in trying to rebuild my presence there. Like, F Facebook with every bit of force that I can possibly muster. But YouTube, you can talk about a lot more on YouTube and Twitch and places like that than you could before. And I think it's that liberating presence of X. Now, the big elephant in the room is that X is terrible with video. So like if you're a content creator, you're doing this sort of stuff, for whatever reason, X doesn't want to give you any reach. If they want to take over video, like I would love for X to be my primary outlet for video content, but their algorithm just doesn't reward it. They just hate video over there. I don't know why. But in the meantime, I'm pleasantly surprised with how much you can actually say on YouTube these days compared to 2, 3, 4 years ago, where I encountered all kinds of problems on a regular basis. I mean, I got banned for a video that included Donald Trump reading a poem, and I got banned for that poem that Trump read. I wasn't even reading it, and I had to navigate that and to actually start making content this time. So you all know the story about why I pulled back. I had people showing up at the house. Things were getting kind of weird. And we were moving provinces anyway. I was having kids. There was all this stuff going on. But one of the last things that happened to me on YouTube, kind of like a cherry on the cake, was that I got a content strike, and they wanted me to complete this mandatory re-education thing where I had to go through a bunch of scenarios and basically say the right woke answer. And the funny thing is I still had to do it. All these years later, I still had to complete that questionnaire. And of course, I just gave them the answers they wanted, and I got my stuff back. But as much as I have tried to self-censor on YouTube somewhat, like I've tried to say things in a way that I feel the censors would bypass, I fail miserably, and I just blurt things out all the time. I haven't had any problems yet. Touch wood. I haven't had any problems yet. So I think that's that. They don't want to have their lunch ate by X, which is now the most popular platform. So I think they've backed off a bit without announcing it. FYI, when you move, it's your responsibility to contact Elections Canada, your new address for a paper ballot. If you don't, paper ballot goes to the old address. That's very true. And if you decide to move provinces, say you decide to take advantage of the wonderful place that is Saskatchewan, for people of the right mind, if you're some left-winger who wants to transition your children, please stay away. Just stay away. You're not going to like it here, for one thing, because people make fun of that in the streets. Like, I mean, it's just not accepted here, which is awesome. But if you're one of those refugees who's trapped in Ontario or BC and you're looking around and you're going, these places are nuts, the value proposition of Saskatchewan's pretty compelling. Like, if you're afraid that it's all flat and it's just one big unending winter, it's not all flat. The winter's pretty long, but it's actually really cool. Like, as somebody from Ontario, in Eastern Ontario, you had freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw. It was always this skating rink, then it was mud, then it's a skating rink, then it's mud, then you got a dump of snow, and then it melts, and everything's a skating rink again. Winter comes here, and it's winter. It's nice, it's fluffy, it's blowing, it's not dirty, it's not muddy. There's no salt everywhere rotting out your vehicles. Winter's awesome here, and there's a culture of looking after each other. So those times when you do have to go out in the morning and it's minus 35 or minus 38, there's always someone around looking after you. Like, you're always going to be safe. So if you think Saskatchewan's too cold for your needs, as I once did, was one of the things, I'm just like, it's too cold there. It's awesome. Don't worry about the cold. It's the best winter I've ever experienced in my life. And hey, you can go to Florida if you want. Government made buying weed stressful. Yeah, you certainly do feel like you're a criminal going into a pot shop. Now, admittedly, I do not have much experience. I think I've purchased weed in a government store 2 or 3 times for presents for people. I refuse. I refuse. But hey, if other people are cool with that, then I'm happy to cater to it. But yeah, it feels like a criminal. It feels like you're a criminal engaging in crime, and you don't even get to see the product that you're buying. It's just disgusting. It's deplorable. Apparently, the old school weed delivery folk have great rates in Primo. I don't smoke, but I have beers. Buddy, so I got a friend of mine, and this guy smokes, I mean, he smokes a lot of weed, like tons of weed. And it gets mail ordered to him by the pound. There's whole companies, they're apparently based off the legality of the reserve system, and they use the Postal Service to mail kilos all over this country, and they're just destroying government weed shops. It's like, man, you're never going to make any money if you're getting wrecked by these people, and you got to feel for policing. We got fentanyl, we got meth, we got all these really bad things that take priority and should take priority. They ain't got time to figure out whose weed is legal and whose weed is not legal. The government needs to change their policy. YouTube is refining their tech. Everything said is translated into a database and stored forever, everything, including the chat. I don't care. I don't say anything online that I'm afraid of. And I care about privacy. But quite honestly, when you're putting yourself out there online, you should always assume that there's a record of it everywhere forever, even in your DMs. So privacy in an in a totally information-aware world, which captures everything, privacy is a space that you create. If you want genuine privacy, you have to invite people into your home, and you have to have a room, and everybody leaves their cell phones on the other side of a very thick wall, and you hang out in that room. Like, you literally need to create private spaces because everything's becoming public. So there should be a marriage in your life between your private life and your public life. The two shouldn't look that much different. And that's it's your ultimate protection moving forward. And it's not like it's I'm not giving up on the concept of privacy or your rights, but that just seems to be a reality. What is your Twitter X account? So, hold on. Oh, come on. Why do I have such a problem? And now I can't even scroll the chat. My Twitter X account, at FP Vaughn, so my name, FP Vaughn, and the third. So it's like FP Vaughn with 3 eyes. If you do a search for Frank Vaughn, you'll probably find me. Yeah, now I've lost the ability to scroll the chat. Isn't that wonderful? Hello, Frank. I remember listening to you when you were growing garlic in Ontario, and it's now... Oh, I got my scroll back. Perfect. Guess we'll see come October 25 when the firearms amnesty is done. Yeah. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if it gets kicked out even further than that. But even if the amnesty expires and they've created some kind of master stroke of government efficiencies so that they've actually got somebody set up to do the buyback and to manage it, because they don't have anything right now. Even if they do, being in Saskatchewan's a good spot because they have to comply with all of the requirements the Saskatchewan government set up to implement that buyback. And also the Saskatchewan government said that it is the lowest priority on the RCMP's list. So they've done everything they can legally do to make sure that C-21 is completely unimplementable here. I mean, legally speaking, you still have to keep these banned firearms in your safe and locked up. Like, their legal status is still in limbo, but they're not getting taken from you very easily here in this province. And that's because of the Saskatchewan Firearms Act. Here's one. It's all Masonic trickery. All Shriners are Masons, but not all Masons are Shriners. The whole thing is controlled by secret cults. Not to worry, all will be revealed in a short time. I have no doubt there's secret societies that exist at a high level, but the fact of the matter is, I've known all kinds of Masons in my life. I actually, at one point in my life, I looked into joining and I was accepted, and then I didn't follow up on it because I kind of weighed the balances, but I thought to myself, how am I ever going to understand this thing unless I get involved? And then I realized I don't really want to get involved because that's going to taint me. If I get involved and I'm public about it, people are always going to assume I'm in on something. Masonry's dying, folks. Like, it's dying. Lodges are closing all the time. One of my best friends back in Ontario was the, I'm going to get the name wrong, but the master of his lodge. And in his time as the master of this lodge, he overseen the closing of several other lodges, and they're rolling into his lodge. And he's just like, I can't even get anybody to do the procedures anymore, to do the rituals, because everybody's in their 80s and they can barely stand on their own feet. So there might be secret societies, and I'm sure there are. Bilderberg, it's a secret society that's in the open. Council on Foreign Relations, there's a long and storied history with people in positions of power. The entire founding of the Federal Reserve, The Creature of Jekyll Island, great book. You can read all. To conspire is part of the human condition, all the more so for people who are in power. But the organization of Masonry itself and the rank and file people, they're not, membership in that group does not automatically mean you are part of the conspiracy. The vast majority of people, it's a social club, and it's a dying social club. Like, fraternities are dying, and I'm not sure it's a good thing. I'm really not sure it's a good thing. Let me put it this way. Any of the Masons that I've ever known in my life have been really upstanding people. These are the volunteers. They're your volunteer firefighters. They're the good people. They're the good cops. So yeah, that might not be a popular opinion, but it's what I've observed. I was in Toronto in 1993, got told Toronto is Canada and Canada is Toronto. Yeah, the center of the known universe. There's that comment I started with. Hello, Frank. I remember listening to you when you were growing garlic. I'm a trucker from Saskatchewan. Welcome to here. Glad to have you. Man, am I ever glad to be here. Like, as I said, leaving Ontario was such a relief. And setting foot in this province and setting foot on this soil did not feel like a new place. It actually felt like coming home. And I've been here 2.5 years now, and I've been experiencing the localities. I love it. It reminds me of Ontario in the 1990s, which was a great time to be in Ontario. It was a great time to come of age, man. Did we party then? And there were no smartphones everywhere, and men were men and women were women, and it was such a good time. And then I come here, and that's what this place reminds me of, is the good times again. So yeah, I love being here. I have barbecues and pool gatherings, free speech. Yeah. Only ones you can count on to keep secrets are your dogs. Yep. Yeah, a dog will never let you down. That's for sure. Lib's talking about changing drinking and cannabis age, but they're handing out narcotics for free. Isn't it? It is. You know the word I was going to say. Isn't it? It's so amazing how stupid it actually is that there's some kind of controversy about Alberta and these laws that are trying to protect kids, but you only require permission from your parents if you're under the age of 15. That doesn't go far enough. All this stuff should just be banned outright for anybody that's not of the age majority. But like, you're 15 and you can choose to go by a different name. You can choose to go to this gender insanity, but you can't drink and you can't vote and you can't do this and you can't do that. And you got all these rules and you can't drive a car, but you can do this. Like, everything's so skewed and messed up. It doesn't make any sense. You know, they read your thoughts. Soon they will force hookups to the metaverse, direct link to brains so they can have power outages to fry your cells. Well, I don't know anything about that, but I think inevitably some type of wearable device that allows you to control your computer, control your browsers, control your access to the internet with your thoughts is inevitable. Whether it's your eye movements, whether it's your brain waves, somebody's going to develop and deploy that. We have a real problem, and it's right here. That, well, it's even worse than that, because you have these smartphones. They're actually really stupid because most people use them and they only use them with two thumbs. Your bandwidth, that is your interface between you and all the knowledge that's out there, that the sum of all human knowledge, anything that you can possibly imagine, you can find online, whether it's a guide on how to bake bread or ideas for building shelves or advanced political concepts, courses. Like, why do you even need a university anymore when you can learn anything? Like, just about anything you can learn with the internet. This is your restriction. This is your interface. So even if you're like me and you have a keyboard and mouse every single place in the house where you think you might need to find something, you've still only got as fast as you can type to access information. And we've enhanced that access a little bit with the introduction of artificial intelligence, and not so much the woke ones, but Grok, for instance, it's a great alternative to a search engine, or a great complement to a search engine, because you have a conversation with this thing and then you can go and you can verify its outputs. But you're still limited to your digits. So this is why I think voice to text has had such emphasis. The problem is voice to text is still terrible, and voice understanding or translation of your voice by computerized systems is still not accurate enough to be reliable. So I think that's why there's this movement towards a wearable device where you can control, and that vastly increases your bandwidth between you and the internet, and it opens up possibilities. And whether you like it or not, that's coming. It's going to be a matter of who implements it, how they implement it. Is it wearable so you can take it off? Is it an implant that they want to put in your head? Who are the people that you want to trust with developing that technology? Because that technology is inevitable. Like, people are going to jump on it as soon as it's available. I can't, if somebody presented me a wearable device and they said, when I'm trying to research a video, I could sit here and think my way through the internet and put everything in order before I film a presentation, and I can just put it on and wear it, that's pretty compelling. That's pretty compelling. And I think it's inevitable. I don't know if that makes me a transhumanist or not, because I certainly love humanity. I believe in always having cash. I believe in anonymity of transactions. I don't think your purchases and your finances should ever be made public. Part of my issue with how blockchain's been perceived and developed, and the way that crypto has been treated by the U.S. government and to a lesser degree by the Canadian government, is when you're in business and you're trying to compete with other people, if they know your cost to buy things and they know your cost to sell things, they know your profit margin, and all of your edge disappears, it's so stupid. So you have to have privacy of transaction. And I think you always have to have alternative means to transact. You can never have a fully digital society, because sometimes the power goes out, sometimes the lights go off, and God forbid, we have a few nuclear bombs go off and those EMPs fry systems, you're going to be back to trading with seashells. So I'm a big fan of cash, and I think I'm always going to be. John Diefenbaker was an upstanding Mason. He was the guy who killed Avro Arrow, a liberal money pit, or Canada's highest achievement in aerospace. I think Diefenbaker ended our ability to be an independent middle power. So we had an opportunity to build a deterrent force, because we're a small nation that punches above our weight size. We had the opportunity to build out a military that could do so much damage to a potential adversary, maybe not win a war with the United States, for instance, but we could do so much damage as to deter anybody from thinking they could push us around. And I think Diefenbaker killed that. I think he killed our ability to stand on our own. And since then, we've often talked about being a peacekeeping nation, which is an identity that you can embrace, and there's no shame in it. But since then, we're basically a client state. And some would argue we're just a client state of the Americans, but I don't think that's tenable. I think we've moved from being a client state into this period of time right now where we are a resource colony. And we have China, and we have India, and we have Khalistanis, and we have Palestinians, and we have all of these various diasporas, and they're all fighting over a piece of the pie. And you're being fed this argument that it's a post-national state, that this is all multiculturalism and this is all bliss, even though you're being taken apart piece by piece. Our businesses have been sold off. Our resource sector has been sold off. And it's been happening aggressively for the last 20 years. It's a bipartisan thing. It really started under Gretchen Martin, got accelerated under Harper, and it is in overdrive in the Trudeau years. So we're being completely gutted. We're making less and less things, and we're fixated on mineral and resource extraction export. So we've lost our national identity, and now it's just a tug of war between all these other competing interests. It's disgusting. I think it's reversible. I think it's reversible to a degree, but it's going to be very hard to reacquire the kind of independence of movement and thought that we had pre-Diefenbaker. That's my thoughts. Please turn up your volume a little, please. Okay, we'll do that again. Hopefully I'm not overpowering you. They won't believe it unless a computer spells it out for them. Hacking the temple is so convenient. Transhumanism isn't human at all. It's just the optimistic belief that we can improve the species. Interesting. Gold and silver is good? Yeah. They're better than money for sure. I think just about everything's better than money right now, especially the way the Canadian dollar is weakening. Like when the Canadian dollar is dumping like it is, it's a good time to just get out of it. Like when it comes to economic theory, money is often perceived as wealth, and it is not. It's the opposite of wealth. The things that you possess, that is your house, your tools, your vehicle, if you have a business, your means of production, that is value. That is actual wealth. Money is the medium of exchange. Money is actually debt. So the more money you have, the more in debt you are. Funny thing. So when your currency is being devalued, the best thing to do is get rid of your money and put it in other things. Gold, silver, tools, the means of production, land, resources, things that will inevitably gain value as a hedge against the inflationary decline, if you will, or the inflation of your money's purchasing power. So money is the absence of wealth. It's not the presence of it. It's like a whisper. Is anybody else having problems hearing me? Can I get people to weigh in on that? Or is it just certain people? Because I don't want to crank this up too much. What do we got here? The evolved in charge of their own evolution. That's a laugh. Can barely hear you and my volume is over 50. No, your sound is good. Sounds fine. I can hear you. The funny thing is that everybody's going to have a different different audio needs, so it's kind of hard to match everybody. You're kind of aiming for an 80 to 90% equilibrium. Betty, hello, Betty, from Niagara. I absolutely love how you always somehow manage to be the first person commenting on all my videos. I don't know how you do it. You're always there, and you're always friendly. You never really say much else beyond good evening, good morning, or good day. But it makes my life a little bit better every time I see your name. I got to be honest with you. It's amazing how small things can have such a profound effect. And her just saying hi always makes me smile. I used AI interface to prove to a friend that 60% of the Saskatchewan economy is funded by the government. I'd be interested to see how you came up with that. Flavored cigarettes. They banned flavored cigarettes, but flavored vapes are allowed. I did not know that. I actually did not know that. Did we actually ban flavored cigarettes? You can't buy menthols anymore. I remember in school, one of the things all the guys said was that if you smoked menthols, you'd just end up gay. I never smoked menthols. Let's see if I missed anything up here. Is the only worthy purpose innovation? No. And that's kind of interesting. I think expansion is be fruitful and multiply, so is the command. And I think innovation is a knock-on of that. It's corollary. But, and I've struggled with this in the recent past too. What is meaningful living? What does that actually look like? How do you define it? Is somebody who reads books all day, so long as they're not hurting anybody, are they presenting a net harm to humanity? Can you argue that they're not? Are they wasting their time? Is somebody who likes to paint pictures, are they wasting their time? Somebody who makes YouTube videos in the presence of 50 billion YouTube videos being produced every single day, are they wasting their time? Somebody who runs in politics for a low popularity party, are they wasting their time? Somebody who's actually sitting in the legislature, banging their head off the wall, trying to do something good while they wait their turn and play the political game, are they wasting their time? I've thought about this a lot. And I think that's a really hard thing to be really firm on. I think you don't want to harm other people. I think you want to promote the health of your community, of your province, of your country in any way you can. But is sitting beholding the sunrise through the trees, like this morning, I'm thinking specifically of this morning. I wake up, it's foggy out, and it's hovering right around zero. And the fog is condensing on all the trees to create a thick layer of hoarfrost. Not the thickest layer I've ever seen, but everything is glistening. And it's like the first kiss of winter. It's not quite the first snowfall, but it's the first kiss of winter. You know, it's just around the corner. And I spent a good chunk of my time drinking my coffee, just looking out at what I found to be the beauty of it. And eventually the sun came out a little bit, but it only came out on one side of the area. The whole other vista that I'm looking at was still shrouded in mist. And so you could actually see the sun march right up to the wall of mist, and then it stops because the mist blotted it out. You could see into the mist where it was still shaded, and it was just, it was magic. Now, some would say I was wasting my time. Why wasn't I doing some of the research that I do every single day? Why wasn't I making content? Why wasn't I helping my son to practice his sentences? Little kids in kindergarten, he's writing sentences. Man, we're really getting that. Why wasn't I doing 15 other things? Why wasn't I cleaning my house? Why wasn't I folding laundry? Why wasn't I doing dishes? But I don't see what I did as a waste of time. And some would argue they would. Look, a guy like Elon Musk launching rockets into space, putting everything on the line for Trump, looking like he's going to go into the administration and reduce the size of government, a guy doing all these really extremely important things. How much time does he waste playing that stupid game, Diablo 4? I mean, he plays that game all the time. Now you could argue video games are a waste of time too. I've played a lot of them in my life. My forte is strategy games. Like I like EU4. I like Civilization. I like games where I really got to think and like I can zone in and I zone everything out. But like even another way to look at it is even the most powerful people in the world have got to visit the loo once or twice a day. What is a waste of time? It's a good question. It's a really hard one to answer. I definitely think living on the street, smoking crack, doing meth and fentanyl, I think that's a waste of time. Absolutely. But otherwise, it's pretty something. Sometimes some of these questions are pretty big and really hard. If you buy cigs online from Reserves, you can still get menthol. Of course you can. Why can't you? It's only banned for everybody else, and the Reserves get to make all the money, and good for them. If the government's going to be stupid enough to create these artificial markets, why wouldn't the Reserves go, hey, there's an economic opportunity, good for them. Let them make all the money until we figure it out. Do you not think it was odd that when we stood up, all the wars kicked off? Agenda 2030, depopulation, all on Google. It's not hidden. There's easier ways to depopulate the earth. Like you don't really need a depopulation or you don't need a depopulation agenda to accomplish that objective. We're already doing it. For instance, if South Korea carries on their current demographic trajectory, there's going to be less than 1 million of them in 100 years. Like we are already on the depopulation. It's already happening. We're doing it organically. People just stop having babies. So like, as much as the powers that be talk about depopulation, as much as they have done some very nefarious things like Bill Gates and his money going into Africa and sterilizing people in these high birth rate areas, Tuskegee, there's so much bad stuff that goes on. But the fact of the matter is, when we are already engaged, especially in Western civilization, in depopulating ourselves, why do you need an overarching nefarious thing that is going to stop people from having babies? And like why for instance, in a country where 90% of people took the first C-19 vaccine, why are they still able to have kids? I'm not saying there ain't problems, and I'm not saying there ain't massive side effects, because there is. It's demonstrable. It's covered up. There's bad things going on for sure, but it didn't completely wipe out our ability to have children. So depopulation is a tricky one because we're already doing it. So it's like the idea that chemtrails are depopulating the earth. Why would they? They don't need to. We're doing it to ourselves. We are literally in decline. It's half the reason they're doing mass immigration is because we are in a period of population decline, and they're trying to stop themselves from having to deliver the bad news to the population by trying to plug the hole with all this mass immigration, and it's not working either. I mean, the answer is people got to start having more kids. We don't need less people. We actually need more people, and we know that now. The Chinese are in the midst of a huge demographic crisis. The Japanese, the South Koreans, India is already starting to look ahead because their birth rate is falling. Their population is going to peak, and it's going to start falling off, and they've got the same problem where they're going to have this huge portion of their demography that's going to be over the age of 50 and 60 years old and moving out of the workforce, and fewer young people to try and carry them because people aren't having children. It's happening everywhere. Too much mind is a problem, just like too much heart. Absolutely. I often look at the heart is leashed by the mind. I think it's far more threatening to engage empathy anywhere possible. There's a thing called toxic empathy, and I think we have way too much toxic empathy. That's why we're transitioning kids, toxic empathy. The heart cannot remain unleashed. It has to be leashed by the mind for sure, but you need heart because your mind, if you're all mind and you're no heart, you're too analytical, you're too cold, you're too dry. You take the human dimension out of decision making. But if you're all heart, you're just leading with emotions. You're making emotional decisions at a societal level, and that is far more chaotic and destructive. And then you're bewildered when you don't get good results, and you're unable to process it because you're coming from here and you're not coming from here. The Trump team now includes Ron Paul. Learned today from you. I think he has put together a great bunch of folks. Yeah, I think it's going to be a party. I mean, if he wins, it's a party. The global system, which is leading us to World War III, needs a vast shakeup. And the first and primary place that it needs to be shook up is the United States. And look, if Trump gets in and this administration starts rocking things, it's going to change how our country operates. It will embolden the Conservative Party of Canada. It will embolden Pierre Poilievre to move on a bunch of different fronts that he may not have moved on in other times. Like, I already think there's this concept that the CPC is the same as the CPC under Scheer and the same as the CPC under O'Toole, and I can't disagree more because there's some very key differences which I enjoy, and some people don't like. He doesn't talk enough about immigration. He doesn't talk enough about some of these big ideas. I would argue that he doesn't have to go hard on those things because it's already starting to change. I mean, you've got the Trudeau government that's been telling you, him and Singh have been telling you that immigration is a cornerstone of Canada's national identity, that we are a post-national state and the only choice we have is to import 500,000 to 1 million people every single year. We got the Century Initiative, which wants to increase the population of Canada to 100 million by the turn of the century, and most of these people are signed on to it, okay? They've been telling you that any kind of criticism on immigration is racist tomfoolery, and they've been telling you this for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, one day they woke up and they're just like, actually, we're going to deport a bunch of international students, and actually, we're going to deport a bunch of temporary foreign workers, and actually, we're going to reduce temporary foreign workers, and we're going to make them harder to come into the country, and actually, we're going to reduce overall immigration numbers of permanent residents by 20%. Just a starting point. I've been talking about this for a year and a half, that the pivot on immigration is going to happen no matter who's in office. And in a sense, I'm kind of happy that it started under Trudeau's watch because it's going to make the next government's job easier when they lower it further to try and stamp out all of the problems mass immigration has caused. I used to think in the Harper years that 250,000 a year was too much. Honestly, if we had have stuck to 250,000 mostly economic immigrants every single year, going back to when Harper left office, Canada would be in a much better position today. It's okay for a nation. Like, they talk about exploitation and they talk about racism and they talk about all these equality and DEI ideas. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program is absolutely taking advantage of ethnic minorities. Like, it's an importation of cheap labor and fully taking advantage of them. We already recognize, and this is my only point, we already recognize as a nation that it's okay to have immigration that is by its nature exploitative, that it serves the national interest. And the deal is, look, you live in a country where you can't even hope to make $5,000 a year, but you can come to Canada, you can live for cheap, you can make good money, you can send that money back, and you get that money. But we're not going to give you permanent residency. The deal for you is the money. And then when we're done, you go home. It's a fixed period. We'll sign a contract with you. But don't think you're just going to automatically get citizenship. And don't think you're going to come here as an international student, and then you're going to apply for asylum or refugee status or any number of other different loopholes to get your foot in the door. We don't have to do that. We already exploit immigration. That's the whole idea of mass immigration, is exploitation. We need to do it better and even more fairly for those people that, like, there's people who come here, they get dropped on our shores and they try to survive in Toronto and Vancouver and find out they can't afford to live anywhere. So they're being stuffed into bedrooms, 4 or 5 people to a bedroom, completely disillusioned. They want to go back, right? So it's broken in a few different ways. And the government's been very slow to catch up. But I think they're catching up now, which is why I don't know why it doesn't get more attention. This is a really huge pivot for Trudeau and Singh on immigration. Like, it's a massive pivot. The people who told you were a racist for suggesting even a fraction of what they've done are now just doing it. The change is here. The change is here. $20 a carton for cigarettes. Yep, they've always been cheaper off reserve, that's for sure. Societal pressures are used for population stewardship in tandem with universal health care. States' access to your body. Yeah, I mean, you should always have bodily autonomy and sovereignty over your body. The only issue that requires some kind of debate is the abortion issue, because there is a debate to be had there. And I don't know why people don't use this. So I'm going to grant you a boon. I'm going to grant you a boon. And the boon is this. When it comes to abortion, when you have to have this conversation, whenever men enter into the conversation with the radicals, they say, why are men telling women what to do with their body? It's very simple. Men get to have an opinion on this subject because we bear all the liability, especially here in Canada, when the vast majority of family law always finds in favor of the mother, and it's always the guys who are taxed with all the burden, the financial burdens that go on in perpetuity. I know a guy who's still paying support on a kid that's 23 years old. She doesn't even live with her mom anymore, but he can't find somebody to like, he's got lawyers involved. He's all this stuff. He can't find somebody to stop the garnishing of his wage. Nobody seems interested in the government, and his lawyers are baffled. They have no idea what to do for this guy. So, like, as long as you as a man bear responsibility based on the woman's choice to keep the baby or get rid of it, the very least that you're entitled to is your opinion. And I don't know why more people don't use that argument. I mean, you're on the hook for the decision as a man. So why don't you get your opinion when it comes to the pro-life, pro-abortion debate? At least in Dubai, they isolate their indentured slave workforce. They have to live on boats offshore. Well, that's an interesting subject too, because we never talk about what other countries are doing. And like, on so many different fronts, no other nation would tolerate from their governments the kind of behavior that is common, particularly in North America. So like, many governments are not, many cultures, I shouldn't even say governments, it's cultural. The transgender stuff doesn't fly. The mass immigration stuff, look, China's not bringing in 500,000 Europeans every single year. Neither's India. And you could argue that people don't want to go there. I mean, China, it's hard to argue, or Japan. Of course, North Americans would want to go to those places. There's ample reason to go to those places. We're not really allowed to. And when you go to China and you want to do business in China, there's a lot of rules, whereas Western civilization just seems to be wide open to anybody who wants to exploit us. And why don't we talk about that more? Why don't we talk about the fact that all these other nations that we're supposed to be wide open to and we're xenophobic if we're not wide open to will not let us in and will not extend to us the same rights and privileges that they want here? Probably because they have a sense of self-preservation and identity that we are told is racist in our home countries. Yet the government is apparently targeting pregnancy support that would support, that's something I haven't talked about yet. Taking charitable status away from organizations that actually help you if you decide to have a family. So giving you clothes and giving you supports to actually make life easier to have a baby, which there's an enormous amount of help out there, and there's an enormous amount of cheap stuff. Like, there's some people in our life where you get bent out of shape because they're like, they see how many toys our kids have, and they're just like, oh, they're so spoiled. I never had that when I was growing up. You never had Facebook Marketplace. The deals that you can get, or in Saskatchewan, they have these wonderful things called community yard sales. So they pick a weekend, and then the whole community does their yard sale at the same time. I had a map for one that I did. We hit 76 spots in one day. I drew up a map. We mapped our route. The kids, we all had. And that's just the stuff you pay for. But like, if you're a low-income Canadian and you're contemplating having a kid, if you're under $37,000 a year, your food's paid for that kid. The clothing is paid for. The diapers is paid for. The state already subsidizes childbirth really heavy. I think we call it the CCB. So like, we're already incentivizing it. We should incentivize it more because people need to have more babies. Like, that's part of the conversation we need to have as a country, is that having children is the literal best decision you can ever make in your life. It's so much fun. It's so rewarding. If you had a traumatic childhood, you had a bad time, you can give them better. And what they give you back it's priceless. Like, the best thing I've ever done, hands down, was have children, and I spent way too much time worrying about it and obsessing over it. We should have just been banging out kids. I'd probably have 4 or 5 of them by now if we had got started sooner. But the programming is so intense. They want you to believe that babies are bad. They want you to believe that babies are bad for the world. They want you to believe it's going to disrupt and destroy your life, and it's a lie. It's just such a myth. Like, I remember one NDP person that I knew when we were going to have our second kid, and she's like, "Oh, so you're all done now?" And I'm like, "No. I think, we'll probably at some point try for a third." And she looked horrified. She was like, "Oh, why would you have 3? Don't you think about the carbon footprint?" It's like, lady, get away from me. I don't think about the carbon footprint at all. I'm not anti-human. I think humans are great, and I think children are great. It's incredible. Yeah, I got took for child support until my daughter was 24, and why I had to go bankrupt before I left. I've not seen my daughter in about 12 years, and she lives in Ottawa. It's so sad. There are so many men. I know a guy who successfully litigated his child support overpayments. So, like, he actually went to court, he went to the expense, and he got the court to decide that she was overpaid tens of thousands of dollars. But because she's on welfare, they can't garnish her welfare. So until she gets a job, which will never happen, he can't get a single dime of his money back. That's the state of family law in this country. It's tough. I put stuff on the curb, dressers and lighting, gone within an hour. That is free. I love it. Yep. People are really good, given an opportunity. Most people are really good. Our government would rather import people instead of helping Canadians bring new ones into the world. Yeah, that's a weird thing that we're doing, man. We want people to believe that families are toxic and they're the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, we want to bring as many people in as possible. And most of the people we bring in have very strong family values, whether you agree with them or not, which is why the Conservatives right now are sweeping Toronto. A big part of that is immigrants are more socially conservative and they don't like crime. And you saw that in the BC election. When the most heavily immigrant districts voted overwhelmingly conservative, it's because they don't like SOGI. They don't want their kids programmed in school to have sex changes. And they don't like the homeless camps, the drug addiction, and all the violence. So, and I would almost argue too, and I've thought about this when it comes to the pivot that you're seeing coming out of the federal government on immigration right now, if it's the realization that the voting base that they're bringing in is not voting liberal anymore because they've gone so far left, they've lost that community, so they're like, the hell with it, we'll just start cutting them back. Maybe it isn't actually a realization that they're breaking the country. Maybe it literally is just some kind of narcissistic revenge of our government seeing how voting intention is changing and changing irrevocably. These people do not want their kids programmed with this gender madness stuff, and they're going to vote. They're going to vote against it any chance they get. China buys novel technical solutions from the West to test them out, then reverse engineer them. You cannot get the equipment samples back. Nothing leaves China because they are a strong nation with a strong national identity. They know what they're doing. Their objective is to take full advantage of us in every single way they can and win the game of global empire. And they're doing it. They have a demographic problem, and they have a lot of other kabuki theater economic problems. Like China's not the shining icon of progress that they would like themselves to be. There's a lot of propaganda there. But they are doing the game of culture and nationalism properly by taking full advantage of us, and you have to respect them for that. I do anyway. I don't agree with it, but I respect the fact that they're strong enough as a culture, as an ethnic grouping, as a nation, that they're willing to put their interests ahead of everybody else. That's the responsibility of government. If your government's not putting the national interest first, they're not a very good government. And we have this very pixie dust government right now that just wants to dance around in multicultural bliss while absolutely eviscerating anything that has to do with the core identity of Canada. I often say it's quite symbolic that the one organic Canadian movement, the Freedom Convoy, that has happened in the last several decades was so demeaned and destroyed and is being prosecuted to the maximum of the law. But we got Khalistani separatists and we got Palestinians storming universities, and that's perfectly cool. The police will stand around and protect them while they do it. Because the only thing that you're not allowed to have in this country is a sense of nationalism. Meanwhile, Chinese nationalism is very strong. Indian nationalism is very strong. Saudi Arabian nationalism, very strong. Israeli nationalism, very strong. Ukrainian nationalism is openly encouraged and armed and celebrated, but not Canadian and not U.S. I mean, it's kind of funny how the Democrat Party has tried to put on the air of nationalism, but if you remember, as I do, in 2016 and 2020, they were afraid to even display American flags at their convention. Like, I think it was the Clinton convention where they eliminated the American flag. You couldn't find one. You found the colors, but you couldn't find the flag because nationalism was so beaten down. They were trying to degrade it so much. And then in the presence of real polling showing Donald Trump ahead in this election, all of a sudden they've reawakened the nationalist ideal, and Kamala Harris is basically copying the script of the new Republican Party. The left has no scruples. They only care about power. It's amazing how the majority, thanks to democracy, greenunism, can make them self-flagellate in almost religious guilt for the climate change parties. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what they do is religious. I often say that atheists are some of the most religious people I've ever met. It's true. They know that they hate God, but they believe that God doesn't exist. And a lot of their mantras are very dogmatic and religious in nature. Like you watch them chant their slogans. You watch the kinds of elaborate ceremonies they go through. It looks like religion. It smells like religion, except there's no God there. So they worship the disbelief in God, which itself is a belief, because you can neither prove the existence of God, you cannot prove the nature of the existence of God, and you can neither disprove the existence of God, or if, by its nature, faith is unknowable. Faith, by its nature, implies belief, and belief means an absence of proof. So if you're practicing atheism, you're practicing a faith system. You're practicing a belief. And these scientists who talk about science as a replacement for God, it's funny how their slogans almost mimic Catholic ceremony. Their self-flagellation and their self-loathing and their hatred and all this stuff is like an inversion of religious ceremony. It's kind of crazy. And then you look at some of the elaborate ceremonies that the United Nations puts on, or the European Union puts on whenever they commemorate a tunnel or some new mega project. The religious iconography is right there. Look at the Olympics, the opening ceremony of the Olympics. I've often said that these people, these evil people who put these showings of debauchery and display with pride an absolute moral vacuum, I've often said they have greater faith than most Christians, because they believe so hard in the non-existence of God that they will dedicate their lives to hating him and putting on pageantry and showmanship in the pursuit of their hatred. So even in that way, they have faith. They believe so hard that they hate with all their being. It's interesting. Trudeau's post-truth state. Yeah, I mean, it's Canada is we're in trouble here. We're in big trouble here. Hopefully it's over soon. Like, hopefully we can start moving back. Atheist agreed. I choose certain facets of good humanity. Yeah, like, I'm not in a position to judge. Like, I talked about in a previous video how, you have all the different facets of Christianity, and you have all the different facets of Islam, and you have all the different branches and all the different families. And I talked about how Anglicanism, if you break it right down to all the people who belong to the Anglican Church, I mean, the Anglican Church was founded so that a king, an arguably bad king, could get a divorce that the Pope wouldn't give him. And now you have a church with millions of adherents all around the world. Kind of weird. You Presbyterians, you got evangelicals, you've got Mormons who are a branch of Christianity. And whenever I get into this, there's always people in the comments who are certain, absolutely certain that their branch is the branch, and they'll tell me why. And I'm happy to read it. Jehovah's Witnesses are certain. Unitarians are certain. Calvinists are certain. Orthodox, everybody's real sure. I'm just over here saying, I don't know. Now, I have beliefs. I bow my head in prayer. There's certainly something that I believe rewards good behavior and good intention and follow through. I have a belief system. It's deeply personal, so I often don't get into the details of it, because as soon as you get into the details, it invites debate, and a debate I'm not interested in having. If you've got your faith and you're certain in your faith, I don't want to take that from you. Because the people I really feel sorry for are the people who have no faith at all. I don't even know what to tell them. If somebody believes in absolutely nothing, and they believe there's absolutely nothing magic going on in their life, and they have no spiritual inclination whatsoever, and they fall on hard times, it's a doom loop. If you go down that thought process, if you actually take that to its logical conclusion, it's a doom loop where at the end of it all, nothing you do matters, so what's the point of anything? And it's really dark. And I know people who are in that place, and their life is an unfolding expression of a constantly evolving depression. There's no light. So, if you've got faith, I used to be that guy. I highlighted in another video how I spent a lot of time with Jehovah's Witnesses. I invite them in to this very table that I'm sitting around right now. And they'd all sit around it, and I'd make them tea, and I would debate with them their faith and the foundations of their faith with their book and their literature. I obeyed all their rules, and my whole objective was to sow doubt in their minds that Jehovah's Witnesses were the best and ultimate religion. And I had a degree of success. And it's one of the few regrets in my life that I even entertained that, because looking back at that now, one of the guys that was sitting at the table, I'm actually looking at the spot where he was sitting. I don't want to say his name. I do, because I still value him and I value his memory. But this guy was he was a bad guy. He was, he was into cocaine. He got into some heavy debt, screwed up his marriage, didn't pay some people. His life was in danger. He found witnessing. He got some protection. He sorted things out. Became a volunteer, worked several jobs, and his whole life was centered around the structure of the Jehovah's Witnesses. But he was the cleaner at a store, and he was always at the soup kitchens, and he was a really good dude who had saved himself through this organization. And I wanted, at that age, I wanted to take that from him. I wanted him to understand that there was something deeply wrong about his particular branch of faith. And I dedicated my time to the point where at one point I was kneeling on the floor holding this guy's hand as he was muttering prayers under his breath, because I could see him. I could see his faith shaking. And I'm like, I've almost got you. And it's where am I taking you to? Where am I going to put this guy who's got his certainty? Why am I doing this? And I didn't think about it until after, because after that encounter, I had the heads of 3 Kingdom Halls, and I had this guy. And I really started hitting them on their founder and a bunch of stuff about Miracle Wheat being sold on the stock exchange. And I talked about the compound in the 1970s and all the Rolls Royces, and I got right into it. And they packed up, and they left as fast as they could, and they never came back. I never had another knock on my door. I'm probably the only person who didn't tell them to get off my property, who had them voluntarily avoid my house. I was scratched off the maps. But as the years went by, and I reflected on it. Part of my reasoning was they manipulate. So like my dad died and they showed up at my house and they're like, "Would you like to see your dad again? Because only through us can you achieve eternal life and can you meet your father again." They did the same thing when my sister died when I was a kid. That whole process screwed up my family. One of my parents went one way, one of my parents went the other way. The Jehovah's Witnesses were intrinsically involved, and I was bitter about that. And then I was bitter that they tried to manipulate me in the same way. So that was kind of my motivation for trying to undermine him. So it was a bit of a tit-for-tat exchange. But then years later, reflecting on it, it's like, I would never do that again. So this is all a long-winded way of saying, if you got your faith and you're secure in your faith and it brings light and it brings hope and it doesn't make you an evil person, it encourages you to do good things and to lead a good life, I am not interested in taking that away from you at all. It's not even a debate worth having. Because honestly, I don't have the answers anyway. Because like I said at the beginning of this video, I don't think it's knowable. I don't think you can know. Wisdom is embracing ignorance. All I know is that I don't know nothing. It's a great quote. And the more that you know, the more questions you have. The more knowledge you gain about any subject, except for the physical subjects. So it's like, shelf building, building structures, concrete, things like that. The more you know, the more you know. But when it comes to issues of public policy or it comes to issues of religion, the more you know, the more questions you have. Like knowledge is it's an endless pursuit. You could probably live for 1,000 years and still arrive at the conclusion that you don't know a single thing. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool quotes from the Bible. Socrates was wise. Yeah, the Socratic method of asking questions is very powerful. I often deploy it myself to overcome people who are very rigid in their way. When you're talking about public policy, for instance, one of the best ways is to never make a firm statement. Just keep asking them questions and allow them to answer themselves into cognitive dissonance. And then once you've got them cognitively disassociated, you back off and walk away. It takes a lot of discipline, but that's really how, people say that you can't win an argument, which is kind of true. You can't win a straight up confrontation, but you can absolutely put ideas in someone's mind or have them sow those ideas in their own fertile field of their mind. And then you have to have the self-possession to just back off and walk away. When you've made your point and you can actually see it stick, go in the other direction and just let them sleep on it. You don't need to see the outcome or the results. You don't need your ego to be assuaged with a victory. The idea is sown. Let it do its work. And I've seen this work in my life too. Like there's a guy on X right now, and it's funny because we debate, we talk about PPC stuff sometimes. And he said some pretty nasty things to me back when I first left. And recently, in a comment, he sought me out and he's like, "Man, am I ever sorry, for the things I said back then?" And I just said, "Dude, it's all forgiven. It's all good. Understanding's an evolving thing. Truth is a moving target. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. And you have to be an evolving, changing person." But now that that's all let go, there's a guy that, I probably made a friend for life because we connected on that human level. And part of that is just being able to withdraw and not just always be on the offensive, always attacking. When you score a victory, back off. An intellectual victory, just back off and let that percolate inside of someone's mind. My life is like an episode of Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch. I always was for God, but fell away from Jesus. The Bible is real life stories and guidance to our Maker. If religion in your life brings community and peace in your soul that helps you grow, great. If it suppresses you, it is wrong. I think to a degree that's true. I think having having a moral compass and moral guidelines suppresses you. It limits you. It limits your actions. So if you know that something's wrong, you don't do that. So by its nature, having that moral compass is a limiting factor. It helps you to control your own urges. So that's kind of where I think it's a little gray. Having a moral compass having a moral compass, an inevitable outcome of having a moral compass is self-denial. And self-denial is a really important part of growth. Like in my Twitter profile, one of the phrases I have there is delay gratification. And it's funny how leftists always think I'm talking about copulation, which is just, why do they always do that? Why is Donald Trump sucking off a microphone, and why is delayed gratification automatically about copulation, like semen retention? Like, what is wrong with these people? This is where they go. But anyway, I digress. Delayed gratification is a process of self-denial. So like every time when I lived back east, we would roll our dimes and our nickels and our quarters every year. We would save them up the entire year, and then we'd roll them, and we'd roll into the Bank of Nova Scotia, and we'd slap $300-400 down on the counter, and we'd make that extra payment on our mortgage. That delayed gratification, even though we had to live with less, that restriction, that suppression, allowed us to pay that mortgage off early in November of 2021, and was actually the thing that made selling our house and moving to Saskatchewan feasible and easy. Because if we had to go through a bank and get permission from them and deal with the insurance companies and everything else, it would have added a layer of complexity that might have, who knows? Who knows if it would have happened or if it would have fallen through? Like, who knows? But being able to, everybody used to ask me, especially when I was in my 20s, we didn't get our mortgage, so actually I was already in my 30s. But even getting to the point where we got our mortgage, there was this delay of gratification. Everybody was always asking, what are you doing this weekend, man? You know, you going to come party? You going to come do this, do whatever? And I'm like, no, I got to make money. So I'm going to hustle 7 days a week. And I'm going to do that 8 months of the year. And then hopefully I'm going somewhere good with it. So like we didn't do a lot of stuff. Like we stuck pretty close to home, and we kept living real cheap because we had debts to pay off when we met, and then we had a house we had to try and secure. Like the level of insecurity that comes with your means of production, that is the farm, being owned by someone else, not just one person, but two people were involved, because the land, part of the land we farmed was another farmer's, and then the house we lived in was someone else's. And at any point they could pull the plug on us. And everything we'd built was gone. So it's like we have to work real hard, and we got to delay gratification to be able to better secure this so that somebody can't take it away from us. And there's always somebody that can take it away. The point I'm trying to make, without getting too deep in the weeds, is having a moral compass and an idea of what you're shooting for is suppressive. It suppresses your actions. It narrows your range of possibilities in the moment, but expands them later on down the road. So I think self-denial is a really important part of spirituality. I think it's done a world of good for me. Didn't find anything wrong with Jehovah until they said dogs had no souls. Somehow that was it for me. Yeah, I don't know, man. Dogs are really special creatures. Like, I'm not a dog guy. Well, I'm kind of a dog guy, but I don't like they tie you down. And I don't like, personally, whatever anybody else does is fine, but I don't like imposing my pets on other people. So it kind of limits my range of options. That said, I've had some dogs in my life. Charlie dog back on the farm was like the best dog you'll ever meet. Man, I miss that boy. If I had an opportunity to have Charlie back, man, I'd have Charlie here for sure. Like, he was a good dog. But I wasn't expecting to think of Charlie today. They are such loyal creatures. They're such beautiful creatures. And I remember sometimes sitting there, and it was like he was Dad's dog. This is interesting. Sorry, I'm just accessing these parts of my brain. Charlie was my dad's dog, and so when my dad died, Charlie was around for a little while afterwards, and he became our dog. And if Dad went out and he didn't come home in time for dinner, if Dad stayed the night at a friend's house or something, Charlie was off his food. He'd be whimpering and whining at the window, and you would swear the world was ending. One time Dad went away for 2 days. Charlie didn't eat for 2 days. He just laid under his tree, staring up the driveway, waiting for Dad to come home. And when he came home, man, he was just jumping. He was so happy. Then came the day that Dad died. We all sat down for lunch like we always did around this table. Wow. You know, I don't think of that often. It was this table. This table I use as my desk now. Man. I don't know if I can get into that too deep. But I will say that when all was said and done, the dog didn't pine or miss a meal. He was the only one that ate that night. So when we still had fire people and police and everybody running around the house, the dog was waiting for his dinner. And that dog never missed a meal. So I remember after everything had quieted down and, you know, coroner leaves, everybody leaves, the body leaves, and you're just left with it. You're left with the silence. I remember Charlie was outside. He's wagging his tail and he's running around and he's doing Charlie dog things. And I'm looking at him in the sunshine and I'm thinking, man, that dog, like this is so deep. This dog that was so screwed up every time Dad left and he hasn't missed a meal. He's like the happiest thing. And I'm like, there's something I'm supposed to learn here. Like this is really deep. And then he lifted his leg up, he buried his nose in his butt, and he started pulling at fur. And I'm like, oh my God, the lesson just gets even deeper. But yeah, dogs are something special, man. I don't know if they got souls. I don't even know what a soul is, but they certainly aren't empty of emotion. They got lots of love. Yeah, my only dog that I ever had was named Charlie. Funny hearing you. Yeah, Charlie dog. Strong family, church, guild. It's a source of strength. Discipline is critical to moral growth, overseen by these intermediary associations. This is key to happiness. The state is an empty vessel. Amen. Birds have souls too. Holy ancestry. A collective soul for sure. Yeah, like I don't know the difference between. There's definitely a difference between mankind and the animal kingdom. There's a. You know, I actually think the whole notion of the knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong, I don't think the animal kingdom perceives them the way that we do. I think that's what is uniquely human. But I don't know if, like, the idea that an animal is completely void of consciousness, I don't know about that. But that's good luck trying to prove that one way or the other. We can't even sort out our own beliefs, let alone figuring out what the animals think. And then, yeah, you go, actually, a person just said plant seeds. Go into plants. Plant life. Like, I know from working with plants for all the years that I worked with plants that they feel pain at some level. They excrete stress. When you're picking tomatoes or you're picking beans or whatever, they don't bleed red, but they hurt. When you break a branch, they seep, and then they got to heal themselves. The smell they give off completely changes when you're working with them. And just because they don't have eyes, and just because they can't see or hear or smell the way that you do as a mammal, doesn't mean they don't have some kind of feeling or consciousness. And we know that trees can communicate via their root systems. Like we have all this kind of cursory knowledge. We know that fungi can act as kind of an intermediary between different plant systems. Like it is so infinitely complicated, and we lack the perspective to understand it. So it's like going back to like one of the highlights or the points that I was touching on earlier about how humans shouldn't be consumed with anything beyond living a human experience. Maybe the same goes for a dog. Maybe the same goes for a bean plant. Like, do you wonder if a dog ever sits there contemplating what these humans are doing with all their activity and busyness and getting into and out of cars and collecting all kinds of trinkets and junk in their homes and just busy and like constantly chatterboxing and never seeming to get anywhere. Like, you ever see your dog or your cat just kind of looking at you like you've got two heads and they can't possibly fathom what it is that's wrong with you? I've had that experience. Who's to know? Maybe they're right. Maybe they're sitting there wondering what it's like to be a human. Anyway, I'm a half hour late for dinner, so I'm going to bail on this. I hope this was useful for some of you. I hope it was entertaining. And the other thing that I will say is I think we're waiting for this election season to finally be over. I know I am. We're down to talking about Donald Trump doing fellatio on microphones. Like, I mean, that's where we're at. And then the other day was him talking about Liz Cheney actually going to war, and they turned that into him wanting to put her in front of a firing squad. I mean, we're at the bottom of the barrel. There isn't much we can do. There's not really much left to say. We just got to get to the day. And as far as the federal government of Canada is concerned, we're all just waiting for an election there too. It's pitiful. I think Jagmeet Singh is the worst politician. I think he's far worse than Justin Trudeau could ever possibly be. He's absolutely soulless. He's absolutely narcissistic. He's sociopathic. And I can't even, as far as politicians go, I've never seen somebody who can sit there and curse and complain about a sitting government that it keeps in power every single opportunity it has. It's disgusting. And I guess we as Canadians are just stuck waiting for this whole ridiculous thing to finish playing out. So, I'm Frank Vaughan. Thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.